Hey folks, I'm Brett Kinsella. This is Gain, the Generative AI News Rundown. We do this every week. We talk about the top news in generative AI. This week we have ChatGPT goes to college. Google has some education things in there as well. We've got a decline in search quality, an actual study that talks about that based on Google analysis of Google, DuckDuckGo, and Bing. We have antitrust actions against OpenAI, Anthropic, and the big three cloud hyperscalers. That and a whole lot more, a couple big funding rounds to talk about today. And to do it, as per usual, I have my colleague, Eric Schwartz, joining me. Eric, how are you?
Good. Excited to learn a lot, as it were.
Learn a lot or dispense your vast wisdom based on all of the erudite reporting you've been doing over the last week.
True. Educate about these AI education plans.
All right, perfect. So we're going to start off, by the way, if you're out there, give us a like on LinkedIn and YouTube. Let us know you are out there in the comments. We look forward to incorporating you into the show today. The first story today I want to talk about is ChatGPT goes to college. Now, this headline here says ASU, Arizona State University, embraces generative AI, but won't pay $100 million. And the $100 million isn't really part of the news announcement. But if you actually just figure out all the people associated with Arizona State University, all of the on-campus students, all of the online students, and all of the faculty and staff, it would be a $100 million annual cost for them to run this at ASU. So they're probably not doing that, but still very interesting because what we have is we have this shift. A year ago, most universities, you wrote about this, Eric, universities, public schools, they were all saying, hey, wait a second, no generative AI shall pass the hallowed gates around our ivory tower institutions of learning. And now we're starting to see people, Russell Group said, hey, I think we're going to embrace this as the 24 leading universities in the UK last year. We've seen a couple other movements along these lines. And ASU just said, hey, we're doing a big partnership with OpenAI. We want this, our staff using it, our faculty using it, students using it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you're sort of underselling the sometimes wild overreactions about ChatGPT last year. The truly crazy stories of teachers like failing entire classes because they were convinced ChatGPT had been used, and that is very much the opposite of the entire university community coming together to not only gain access to it, the technology, but to discuss ways to use it and how best to employ it to the benefit of the students, of the faculty, and everyone else. And obviously for research as well. So it's a big step, and it's ASU is a large school with a lot of departments covering basically every academic discipline you can think of. So it's a good chance for OpenAI to see what works in that setting, and it's a good chance for ASU to stand out amongst the competition of universities as a leader in new technology. So the partnership makes sense, and I think. We'll see what actually pans out of it, but I think this is going to be much more common than the opposite of banning it entirely forever.
I think that's about right. And there's a lot of reasons here too that I think that OpenAI is going to cut a really nice deal with ASU. They're the most strident to come out here. And by the way, if you don't know, they have 65,000 online students and they have 80,000 on-campus students. This is a big university. And there's some competition that goes on, particularly between public universities across the US. So I think this will be important. But there were some reasons that I think OpenAI wants to do this, and they want to cut a deal. And I think I have some sense of how the economics are likely to play out. But the first and foremost, OpenAI would like ChatGPT to be more readily available in institutions of higher learning. So being the first to have this formal partnership is definitely going to enable ASU to have a better deal. And they've been working on this for a long time. In fact, I think one of the things that I was looking at is the CIO had actually been meeting with them since like May of last year, about how to use it. So they want more people to have access in higher ed. OpenAI also wants to avoid its competitors. This includes Microsoft with Copilot and Google and all the other independence from getting a foothold in these universities, because once you get it in, it's going to be hard to get some of these things out. People will build habits, they'll build processes around them.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say you're absolutely right. And it's like the question I think both of us knew even when all the bans were going in that it was just a question of which school would be first, not if any school would ever do it. And ASU makes a lot of sense in terms of its connections to the Silicon Valley scene in terms of the administration, and also just a lot of people from California go to school in Arizona. That's just how it is. So there's a lot of back and forth there. And I think because it's a land grant university, it has there's no concern over like over specialization. You know, anything that ASU tries out in one area that works, they can try out in so many other areas that it's the generalization potential is huge. And I also think that it's going to spark that kind of gold rush feeling among other universities to try to be first in other ways, and that's also all to their benefit. So yeah, this will be there'll be a lot more announcements like this, I think, in the next couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of the people who are watching today might also remember that ASU, I believe, was the first university to formally set up a partnership with Amazon Alexa in dorm rooms using their Alexa for Hospitality solution. And I think that this is just building on from that. I believe that other program is no longer active, but that's a whole other question. Yeah. All right, a couple other reasons why OpenAI might want to do this and cut a really nice deal with them. They want to create habits and preferences among consumers, and for ChatGPT. And if students start early on using it, when they get out, and then they have to decide what they're going to choose themselves to pay for potentially, if they're familiar with ChatGPT and they've used it for 4 years, more likely to do that. There's also a lot of users, and if you think about it, these users are using it for academic pursuit. And one of the things I've come across is that as we're training the models now, quality of the data and the quality of the curation of that data is more and more important as a differentiator to close that gap in terms of any type of quality issues that came up from just like web scraping. And so one of the things they're doing is they're trying to get lawyers and doctors and engineers to do data annotation, to do labeling, to give feedback in their RLHF process in the outputs. And this is going to be a pool of those that they can dip into. And so I think that those are good. And also that, like, if they can actually analyze the data associated with this, they know that these people are using it in a learning environment. And so that could actually help them in the future as well. Now, what I suspect will happen is the reason why we have this not $100 billion, I don't think they're just going to pay $20 a month for everybody. I don't think they're going to be paying $10 a month for everybody. I think eventually this is going to be just incorporated into a student fee, $10 a month or something like that. Or in the meantime, because they are taking applications for use, so not just rolling it out. So different departments, student groups, professors need to say, this is how we want to use it. What I suspect they're going to do is they're going to let's sort of do these grants for a lot of different things and say, yes, we'll turn it on for these groups of people. And then they're just going to be like, oh, everyone else, you can get this. Normally OpenAI charges $20 a month. You can get it for $10 a month if you sign up through. And I think that's probably the way this is all headed.
Yeah, it does make me think of stories of in the 70s of schools applying for access to the ARPANET and different departments applying for time on that network. And now it's the same thing. It's like, it's not that it's universal, but the people who want to explore what it can do will be able to do it.
Absolutely. So quick shout out to Dave Gerbino. He's joining us from YouTube today. Michael Novak says, education standards set by the state will be the next in GenAI announcement. And then he says, Massachusetts, California, Washington State. It's almost as if Michael knew the next story was going to be Washington State at the public school level. So then we just had university. Now we're going down to primary education. They just issued their guidelines, and their guidelines are to embrace generative AI, make it part of the learning curriculum, and to help the state of Washington, the students in the state of Washington, essentially outcompete students from other states because they have more access to this. And what's really interesting about this, which probably everybody attending here today, but if you don't, what companies are in Washington State? Amazon, Microsoft, many others. But let's just say Amazon and Microsoft. Meta has a really big research team there, which is related to this as well. Hey, big tech, they want this approved. Washington State, California are really good places to get that done because that's where they have the most influence.
Yeah, of all the FANG companies, it's the only one that isn't quite as large in Washington State is the one that's seems less has less going on in generative AI, which is Apple, of course.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so now the other thing too is I'll just point this out. I did as I was doing some research on this, I did unearth a study that showed that uh, as of August of this year, I think there were 2 states that had guidelines in place around generative AI. This is public school districts, so public schools, state run. 11 were in the process, and most are either not providing guidance or no response. So that's 13 of 50 in the U.S. had something, but that was actually in August, none had it. In this data is from September. By the end of September, 2 had it, and now I think it's like up to 7. And then there are more states that are doing this. So this is coming, and I think just like ASU is going to be a catalyst for other universities not to fall behind, particularly those with big online learning. I think this will be they'll be motivated by that because Arizona State has carved out such a big niche in online learning. They're going to look at this. I think the big ivory tower institutions, the Ivies, the Stanfords, Caltech, like they'll kind of ignore it because they don't consider Arizona State a pure competitor set, whether that's true or not, like is sort of irrelevant. They don't, so they'll sort of go their own way. But all of the state schools, all the big schools are going to do this, and I think that Washington State is going to put a number of other states in a situation. They don't compete as much directly against each other, but they do compete for pride and prestige and for national rankings for a whole host of different types of things. So I think this is going to start to put a little pressure on some of these other states who their reflexive, reactionary approach to say this is a change, we don't want this, is it's going to be much harder to maintain.
Yeah, there's no more Pac-10, Pac-12. This is where the school pride will come in instead.
Exactly. All right. So, Jürgen Gravestein, thanks for joining us today. We have, and let's see, Michael has the Apple effect. Let the students in and have the base. I think that's exactly right. Apple, what was Apple before the iPhone? What was Apple's base? Designers and education, because they had these programs.
I was going to say the soccer moms who love their colorful iMacs.
Well, I don't know. I'm not familiar with that niche demographic, but maybe that was that was a big one for them. Okay, not to be outdone, you had a story this week as well. Google showcases new generative AI education tools. Usually, Google announces things before they come out of OpenAI. Like they get word of what's going on, and they sort of pre-announce something to say, yes, we're doing this too. And it's like maybe more vaporware than true, and then they sort of catch up. But this came out like a day or two afterwards. What do we have here?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right about it in terms of the usual timing. And what's fascinating about a lot of generative AI product announcements is that because of the generalized nature of the technology, is that sometimes it's just like making people aware of something of a feature that technically already existed, but that people hadn't been thinking of or hadn't been included in other things, like in this case, education. Google came out with the Duet AI assistant, months and months ago, but now they're specifically creating new channels for educators to use for designing teaching lessons, for developing new sort of interactive quizzes for children to, more quickly go through all this sort of, the paperwork details that take up a lot of time, but now they can quickly put it together without that. And there's also new ways to connect it with YouTube, where the AI can help suggest questions that can be incorporated into videos, or help answer questions from students who are watching a video. It's all about essentially, giving teachers that teacher's aid who can put together materials or interact with students when a teacher just doesn't have enough time and can't be in too many places at once to help all the students at the same time.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, the personalized learning. That was also an idea at ASU. They talk about these study buddies. Think of like GPTs, but like specific to a a student and their coursework, or a student and a specific class that they're working on, and those types of things. Whether GPTs can get you there or not, it's like a completely different comment. But Washington State also brought this out, this personalized learning, and we've been moving towards that. We had a story about Soapbox Labs getting acquired earlier this year, and they were working on all these personalized learning for elementary school children for reading and communications. And I think it's really interesting that Google's like, hey, we have a lot of educational material. We have YouTube. Plus, we've got all this other stuff, like you use Google Workspace, and there's Chromebooks everywhere. So this seems like a logical area that we're going to see a lot of activity. I don't know how fast the ramp up of adoption is going to be in education, because they tend to be slow. But I have a feeling if this breaks, it's going to be much faster than all the other technologies that we saw previously.
Yeah, I think it may be quiet, but I think I mean, I'm friends with many teachers, and there's unfortunately a lot of under-resourced teachers out there, and so something like this, which costs little or nothing, but can be the equivalent of 30 hours worth of work a week that the teacher doesn't have to do anymore, it's going to be really popular. And as soon as word of mouth gets around, a few teachers in one school use it, everyone in that school is going to use it and spread from there, I think.
Yeah,
Maybe if it's not Google, it's going to be those kinds of tools.
And Dave Garbino says, where is the private personal LLM for students that can follow you from grade to grade, then from child to child? This would be the true personal assistant. Anybody who knows Brian Romilly, several years ago, he talked about the intelligence amplifier, which would just observe all of your interactions through life and would be always there as like your perfect memory, your perfect assistant to like either help you in the moment or proactively do things for you. That would be great. And I think that this would be super interesting to see how this plays out, because Dave, you are right. If the public schools don't do this, if the universities don't do this, it doesn't matter. The private sector is going to fill in this gap because it's going to be really meaningful.
Yeah, it goes sort of beyond what we're talking right now, but what Dave is saying, I have some theories, and especially after CES, I have some pretty strong theories about something exactly like that is definitely on its way.
Yeah. And Michael remembers the intelligence amplifier. We just threw that on there. Now that's Michael, but we also have McCall Stanislawic. He says, hello, AI people. Hey, McCall, thanks for joining us today. He also says intelligence amplifier. I think all three of us were in that presentation when Brian talked about that originally. I have a great interview with him actually in the podcast. I'll try to put that in the show notes somewhere from, I don't know, it was 2019, I think it was. And I'll tell you that it was a great presentation. It was a little weird in some places, and I think like half the people in the room loved it, half the people just like what are we doing here? So that was like for everybody who was there, it was like memorable, because Brian is very theatrical in the way he produces things. He's also goes very deep into the levels of detail that like a lot of people don't think about. He's talking about crystals to be able to store all the memory or do all the memory. It was like really, really fascinating. Okay. All right. So feel good story. We have, oh, you're saying intelligent amplifier. What presentation? We'll try to help you out with that. Look in the, and maybe Andrew, if you can, just go into VoiceBot's podcast back one, find the one from Brian where we talk about that. I think it's from 2019, and put it in the comments section here. I think people will get a kick out of that. A lot of the things he's talking about are things that the generative AI people are like pushing right now. Although I'd say his vision is still a bit out ahead of the curve on this. Oh, and by the way, everyone on LinkedIn, on YouTube, if you could just give me a quick like or give the show a quick like, just like do that. It's right in front of you. I'd appreciate that. And make a comment. Let us know you're out there. Jump in like the other folks are. We love it. All right. So feel good story about education. That's all the good stuff. And then I don't know how to think about the next story. Is this a feel good story? U.S. antitrust inquiry targets OpenAI, and Anthropic's deals with big tech. Just to give a little bit of background here. U.S. antitrust authorities are looking at Google, Amazon, Microsoft on a regular basis. And what it saw was Microsoft made this big investment in OpenAI. Anthropic got investments from both Amazon and Google. They looked maybe kind of like sweetheart deals or something like that. But your read on it is that this is just the start of the process. And the most interesting thing, I think, is that we'll probably Eventually, these things leak. So we're going to see more about what how these deals were structured.
Yeah, and I suspect they'll become part of larger, or that there will be other elements of it. I mean, we're starting to see discussions about all kinds of problems related to generative AI technology, and I suspect antitrust issues will be folded into the larger question of how do we regulate this kind of technology.
Yeah, absolutely. Michael Novak is like, anytime these things come up, he said, look back in the gain wayback machine. Actually, I will tell people that if so, I think we have 450 posts in Synthedia, and we've got well over 5,000 in VoiceBot. I would say that we have almost 1,000 articles, I think, in VoiceBot specific to generative AI, and the other 4,000 are really more around conversational AI. If you're looking for something that you're looking for a history of something, just go to the search bar of voicebot.ai. I mean, you can go to Synthedia as well, but voicebot.ai is very deep. Between Eric and I and a couple other people who contributed over the years, you can find that stuff much better than Google. And we'll talk about how bad search is pretty soon.
Yeah. And I would say our YouTube, our archive of gain and other discussions we've done, there's a lot of stuff there that I said, we'll see a news story and I'll be like, oh, wow, we talked about that 6 months ago in a gain episode.
I just looked up something about Ecobee
Yeah,
just the other day, and I was like, oh, I bet I know where I can find that information. All right, let's go to Funding Fountain. We had some interesting fundraising this week. ElevenLabs closed $80 million, and this is a $1.1 billion valuation. Now, I got tipped off about this about 2 months ago. I did not write about it because it was told to me in confidence. And at that time, it was looking like it would be about $1 billion valuation. So it's basically $1 billion or €1 billion and 1.1, or close to €1 billion and like 1.1 US. They had raised money back in May of last year. They raised, I can't remember what the number was, like 20 million at a 99 or $100 million valuation. So, and the year before they'd raised like a very small amount at like a much smaller. So it's basically they went 10x in 1 year to like May of last year, and then they went 10x in valuation in the past year. And I was talking to a couple of people in the industry who like run companies in this space, and they're just like totally perplexed at how a synthetic speech company is getting $1 billion unicorn valuation.
I mean, almost exactly a year ago, they raised $2 million to give you some context.
That was 2 years. It was 2 years ago. Wasn't that 2 years ago? 2 years ago, I think it was.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry.
Yep.
Yeah. But even no, it was a year ago. Sorry, 2023, January 2023. Okay. They raised $2 million.
Oh, okay. Got it. Okay.
But it was just, it's happened really quickly, and I think as sort of surrounded by the technology as we are, it's hard to realize, but a lot of like people who don't really pay attention to technology were shocked how good ElevenLabs voices were a year ago, and it very quickly became like a viral, like using it for things that ElevenLabs didn't want people to use it for. That led to a whole issue, but it demonstrated, it showed sort of a shock and awe test to investors, and so yeah, that's why they're throwing cash at it now, and why you're going to see it be incorporated into a lot of synthetic voice projects, I think.
And I think your points are really interesting. Like I just did an interview with one of the journalists of one of the major media companies that had actually started this process a few weeks ago, like writing about ElevenLabs and sort of the rise of that company. And he also commented that he thought it was just better. And I said, like, I've heard voices that are as good as the ElevenLabs voices. So it's not that they have this like wild lead over other people. However, it seems that it's possible that ElevenLabs is better across their portfolio of voices, whereas the ones that we usually hear, which are super good, are cherry picked. And it's like not as clear about sort of, is that the common experience? And a lot of the things are that like, they're good. Like you can go on, you create your voice clone and stuff like that. But ElevenLabs, I think, is a little bit better. And one of the things that we talked about was that it seems like it's better at inflection and prosody than a lot of the others. And so it's not just a good quality of a voice, but it's the naturalness of the delivery of the text to speech, whether it's voice clones or whatever. And in fact, it's almost to that level of speech to speech, not quite as good, but, and so that's the thing that looks different.
Yeah. And it's also that it's very good at relatively quickly letting you hear voices that you know well. You can hear your own
Yes.
synthetic voice within a relatively short amount of time. And you can get a pretty good one very quickly, and a really good one without much more effort or time than that. And it's not it's degrees that may not be that different from Resemble or some of the other synthetic voice generators, but ElevenLabs did sort of like have a came out all ready to go. Like it was immediately like, you're the average person who wants to play around with something fun, a fun toy. Here's that. You're a company that has synthetic voice needs. We have that also ready for you.
Yeah, definitely. Silky smooth. Uh, another quick couple of points before we move on to our next thing. One of the reasons that they seem to be outpacing all their competitors, of which only Synantic, it's the only one I know of that actually got a valuation over 100 million in that space. I mean, it's possible there were some others, but I think they were acquired by Spotify about 3 years ago, 3.5 maybe, for a little over $100 million. And they were going through an A round, and I actually thought that they would have gotten a 40 to $50 million valuation, but like Spotify swooped in and like took them off the market before they did their funding round. But so they've done that. Like the others have not reached that level of valuation, to my knowledge. Maybe someone can correct me if you want to jump on here. But as Mikkel just nailed it, right? He knows ElevenLabs is much ahead of the others. Their API is also better. Their latency is also better. And that's exactly it. And this is actually what Synantic was going to do before they got acquired. They were doing a lot of studio and gaming stuff, really high quality, but they're about to roll out an API, real-time streaming API. And that was one of the things that was going to bump up their valuation significantly, even though they already had really good quality. And this is what I hear time and time again, is it's not just the quality, it's easier for developers to use. The latency is really good. And that a lot of the people who do like NPCs for games and things like that, when they see that the users are selecting voices, a lot of times they have an option. A lot of times they'll choose that ElevenLabs drop down. So I think they also announced like a big marketplace this week for creators who like voiceover actors. I'm not convinced that's going to be successful for them. It might if it just becomes like a giant destination. Someone like voices.com just rolled out Voices AI. They have a whole workflow associated with it. Like for companies that acquire voice actor talent, there's all these other things associated with it, which go well beyond just having a good voice that's easy access. There's all these contractual terms, there's approvals, there's constraints, these types of things all have to be accounted for. And I have a feeling that might not be the place where you get the most traction.
Yeah, and it's also it checks off a box, like when they of concern over oh, could someone like use a voice they like and they have no rights to it. And in this case they're saying like, okay, well, if it's similar, there you can be part of this and theoretically make some money in a legal above board way. And not it suggests that they're giving every legal avenue possible to use the technology, and not just sort of winking at illicit use the way that other startups might at this stage in development.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's talk about another funding story. Our friends over at Spellbook just landed $20 million. Scott Stevenson is actually he might be the only two-time guest on a Synthedia, one of our Synthedia online conferences. Tell us a little bit about this funding round.
Yeah, I guess he had a good contract for it. It's Spellbook. It's one of those companies that started out, the name was a product that then became the company because they recognized that generative AI is really useful for combing through dense and arcane language like you need in a contract. And they started out back with the GPT-3 era, and now obviously advanced GPT-4, but it's the tool that can draft a contract, edit a contract. It acts almost as a semi-legal advisor, in that it will say, oh, these are points that you might want to negotiate on. It's become more and more proactive and useful. And they've really accelerated that. The first time that you interviewed him, you talked about having thousands and thousands of legal groups on a waiting list. And they claim to have 1,700 law firms on board now. They want to hit 30,000. They say there's 86,000 contracts opened a month, and it's still growing. I mean, there's a lot of demand and a lot of revenue already coming in, but they know that it's going to be, because it is such a useful way to use this technology, there's going to be more competition. So they want that funding to scale up the actual business side.
Okay, so we talked about education, and we're talking about law right now. So pro tip to everybody, if you want to see where generative AI is going to make the most immediate near-term impact, just look at industries that have a lot of words, a lot of documents, a lot of words inbound, a lot of words outbound, whatever it might be. Those are the ones that are getting a huge bump right now. And people told me the law is never going to use this, right? Regulated financial services. What we're seeing is these are the industries that are adopting it first because they have the biggest problem. The industries that only work in numbers, I see like a lot of supply chain stuff. Like I used to run a supply chain consulting practice for a very large consultancy. And you know what? It's mostly numbers. It's not words. So people are always trying to do these things. I'm like, okay, that's fine. There's probably some benefit there that generative AI can do for you. But if you just look at the places, healthcare, they have a lot of words. These are the ones that are, even though they might normally be laggards in adoption, they're going to be fast to adoption here.
Yeah, this is one of those things where it's like it's one of the rare examples of maybe it's fine for AI to maybe not take jobs, but AI to be, this boilerplate takes forever to draft, but it's important and you need to do it and you have to do it right. If you can have an AI do it in like half a minute rather than 6 hours of tedious reading and spelling corrections and so on, then I can see why it would be a boon not just to big companies but to independent law firms or independent lawyers even.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing too is what it does, it'll analyze contracts. Like people, if you're not using the summarization, the analysis tools through ChatGPT or Claude for Anthropic, use that, just like put it in. And so just being able to go through and analyze and like Spellbook will come back and say, hey, it looks like this clause might be missing, or this other clause has some terminology that you might not want. So I think that's going to be one of the huge benefits. So anybody who has a lot of words has to deal with a lot of words. Really.
Yeah. And what makes Spellbook and some of its rivals worthwhile, I see Michael Novak asking about hallucinations, and absolutely, it's a really important issue, which is why like a lot of the research and development for them goes into training and narrowing down how the LLM functions to make sure that those hallucinations are, if not entirely gone, then at least so rare as to be easier to spot just through a quality control by a human.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we get into some of the product updates for the week, Jürgen Gravestein had an interesting comment here. It might be a bit random, but the news about Taylor Swift deepfakes posted on X are making global headlines currently. Will you be covering the story in future? So the answer is yes. We do, because we cover a lot of these things. We do, but you want to weigh in on this?
I would just say when I was mentioning earlier about how when you mentioned the antitrust investigation, this is a perfect example of a tangential aspect of generative AI that's obviously not about antitrust, but it will absolutely push for even if it doesn't immediately cause legislation to be put together, it will be the kind of thing that plenty of lawmakers will be happy to hold hearings about or committees about, and at least have the discussion. The debate about whether or not there's ever going to be how quickly actual laws will pass, but those are the things that will form together into one giant, in the future, one giant regulatory framework for this kind of technology, including how the businesses are run and what the actual technology does for good and ill.
Yeah. And I hope they handle deepfakes differently than they handle the other aspects of regulation, because there are some unique aspects. And I will tell people too that I've talked to a lot of executives in fraud recently, fraud detection, those types of things for big companies, the people who use these tools. And most of them haven't done anything yet. Some have, like, some are working with Pindrop and some of these other companies that have solutions. Most of them haven't done anything yet, but they're all like sort of in that education phase. So I have a feeling these things are going to come down. The people who are a little bit further behind are media and they're still trying to figure it out. But I've had some conversations with them as well, and I think it'll be super interesting. Okay. Hey, everybody, this is Game, the Generative AI News Rundown. Thanks for joining us again this week. We had been running these on Thursdays, but it seems like the last couple of weeks it's been on Friday, and it'll definitely be on Friday the next 2 weeks. So just tell you right now, just due to travel and other conflicts. But give us a like, make a comment, let us know where you're, if you're on there, let us know where you are, even if you don't make a comment. Nice to know when people are out there. All right. So Eric, you had done another story on Google Chrome. They embed generative AI, sort of.
Yeah.
I mean, they've announced that they're going to do it. I don't believe it's there yet. I was trying to get it to work with tabs, but
it's the usual, like, sort of out for some people, not out for everyone yet, but theoretically some of it is rolling out now and some of it is going to be rolling out soon. It's the usual Google product rollout where you never really know when it's going to happen, and then one day it's there.
Okay, well, I will just say that some of those features are already in Opera.
Yeah.
I have a podcast coming out with the product manager for Opera and some of the things they've done. So with generative AI, which I think people will look for that next week.
Yeah, the only one that's not in Opera is the I think the theme design one, and even that, and that's just a very Google idea.
Exactly. I think, like, it's one of those things where, like, every product inside the portfolio says, "Oh, me too. I have to have something too," and it's not that these things are bad. It's just like I'm not sure that they're that innovative.
It's also what I was saying before. It's not that it's not a new product, new technology. It's incorporating what they've already created into one of their other products.
And Michael Novak gave a little bit of yawn about Google's latest announcement. All right, so more interesting, I think, is Google's Lumiere, which is a new text-to-video model. Once again, not available, which seems to be a theme here, but very good. If the depending on how cherry-picked the examples are, but they also, what's very interesting is they did a different approach than the other text-to-video models, which basically serially render the image and then like animate it. They actually do it in parallel, and they say that leads to higher quality. And then they had a bunch of real humans evaluate their solution versus the ones that we see. Imagine their old one or their previous model, Pika, which is very popular, Gen 2, which is Runway, and Zeroscope. And then they have one with Stable Video Diffusion too. That's SVD down here. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the Google thing where they claim something they made is so good that they can't distribute it because of how it's too easy to misuse for nefarious purposes. I'll say, that if anyone ever cracked open Google Labs, there's a lot of advanced stuff in there that we won't see, but I think Google is at least a little more willing to share what they're working on after being sort of outmaneuvered by Microsoft in terms of generative AI technology that they were sort of keeping in the vault.
Yes, absolutely. They're going to have to push this out. I think they just, at some point, they're going to realize that they're still being too conservative and they're still a year behind. Do they need to be? And if they come out strong with this right now, they don't have to be a year behind in text to video, even though they still are in some of the other areas. Now, you had another story related to images, and this has to do with copyrighted material, but Nightshade has a tool.
Yeah, so there was it's a group of researchers at the University of Chicago who had developed a tool a few months back that was designed so that you put it into your uploaded art, and an AI model couldn't scan it and use it in its own AI model for creating images. And this goes a step beyond that. It actively infects your model. If an AI model used too many images that have had the Nightshade protocol run on them, it would start to confuse. It would start to misunderstand what it's looking at, and the examples are pretty wild. Where it's like a picture of a dog, and the AI will start thinking it's a cat, or a picture of a car, and it will start thinking it's a cow. It's truly it's honestly almost an art project on its own, but it demonstrates how much potential anger in the artistic community there is about the use of their what they've created without their permission, being used without their permission in ways they don't want.
This could be amazing. It could be an amazing grassroots way to sort of undermine the whole endeavor of just using web scraped information to like make these models. However, what it's going to really do is it's going to limit competition, because if people do put enough images on that, it creates this pollution. the organizations that already have done their primary training are going to have such a huge advantage over everybody else.
Yeah, Getty or whoever who, if they limit their training to the things that they definitely have license to, then yeah, then they don't have to worry about that. This is like almost like rogue software creators, and then being infected by a computer virus when they try to put it out on the web. It's
Exactly.
very
But
crazy.
just think if they do that, they'll think they're taking down Midjourney and Dolly and Stable Diffusion. But really what they're going to be doing is they're going to be preventing anyone else from doing it, because those are the ones who need to scrape the web. The ones who already have all the images, the primary processing done, all now they're just focused on curation, bringing in stuff that's known good. So it might be pulling up the ladder.
But what would help with this? A kind of generative AI regulatory framework that could be put together in by legislatures.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know if anybody will pay attention to it, but so new embeddings models and API updates. OpenAI has news this week. It's so surprising. So a couple things here. You wrote about this. We have a new embeddings model. People don't know that. Like Ada was the old one. This is not GPT 3.5. It's slightly different, and it's cheaper. Or lower prices for GPT 3.5 and GPT 3.5 Turbo and GPT 4 Turbo. I think that's interesting. We've seen, is this the third price reduction we've seen in a year, or is it the fourth?
Yeah, no, it's the third price reduction. The price reduction doesn't apply to GPT 4, just the 3.5 Turbo, but that's the one that most people are using, most APIs are using, and it cuts the input cost by half, and it's 25% off the output token. So it's not nothing, especially when you add it up to the previous price slashings. It's kind of impressive, and apparently, and it does come with some updates to both the GPT 3.5 and 4 Turbo, which I think those who are, especially in businesses, those who are really power users of ChatGPT will be really thrilled to hear that apparently they've cured the quote unquote laziness of GPT-4, where it just sometimes just stops a project because it just decides not to do anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And they also, the other thing that's notable is they have this new dashboard so you can track your tokens, which really is a different way of saying they have a new dashboard so you can actually track your cost. Because like today, everyone had to do that basically through third-party monitoring tools. And that's been like the biggest adoption pattern. The old ML ops tools have shown a huge surge in adoption around monitoring. That monitoring is primarily cost monitoring. There's some other things like model drift and things like that, but people are adopting it because they're like, geez, I need to figure out how much I'm spending.
That feels like such a Silicon Valley startup thing of like, oh, people want to know how to track how much they're spending on us.
Exactly. All right. So let's see. Oh, we have another OpenAI story, although I'm not even going to show this. This is Bloomberg, and they're trying to like advertise on the screen, but I'll just tell you what it is. OpenAI signs up 260 businesses for corporate version of ChatGPT. And I think it's 150,000 employees are using the enterprise edition. There's some others. There's actually many tens of thousands who are part of the trial of ChatGPT, because there were like, I don't know if it was a half dozen or 10 different companies that had like 20, 30,000 people on it. So there's actually probably more. And I think this is interesting because it's showing that since August, they've had this like significant adoption. They went from 0 to 260 paying customers and 260. So that's 10, 100, 1,000. So it's about 500, maybe an average of 500 per. A little over 500 per company, using it. What in case people don't know this, I've understood that when they were selling it, like there was a minimum for an organization to have 150. Now, obviously, we have ChatGPT Team out now, so that you can just sign up for 2 or 3 or whatever. But this is the enterprise edition, and I think this is like impressive, and they're making progress. I kind of feel like it might be too slow, and I've talked to a lot of CEOs of even public companies who are like, I'm not really sure. Maybe I'll do like a little test or trial of it, but I'm not sure I want to commit to it yet. And I have a feeling that they need it to move faster because all these same companies are Microsoft and Google shops, and maybe they just get it from those solutions as opposed to bring some foreign entity in that they don't really understand.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of OpenAI's history where I don't think they anticipated how much ChatGPT would be important versus the APIs and the models behind it. And that early on, when it seemed like they were trying to be behind the scenes of other products, and now they're more about we are the product also. And maybe they're a little slow on the enterprise side of that because obviously Microsoft was quick off the bat with their own OpenAI powered version of it. So I think yeah, I think you're right. We'll see if it's too little, too late, but there's definitely going to be there definitely is demand. It's just a question of it's enough demand.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michael Novak asked, like, is this a true reduction in cost or just a lower price? Is this it might be both, but they actually did say that they had lowered their cost. And I think it's also strategic in that they don't want companies like Anthropic or Cohere to have any oxygen at all. That they're not making enough money to like stay. I think it's like stay in business. But we'll say they're keeping it low. And when you reduce cost, you do have an advantage over competitors, but at the same time, what you do is you make it easier for your customers to use it more. And I think that's a key driver. One is on a competitive front, but the other is just developing this reputation of passing along benefits to your customers and allowing them to use it more. Now, OpenAI had some more news this week, which you wrote about. They've already banned a GPT.
Yeah, the custom GPT store launched, and it has all these rules about what you're allowed to put out there. Most of them were immediately broken, and they're still they're trying to it's the whack-a-mole game. They're trying to get rid of as many of the the ones breaking the rules as they can. But this was a very high profile rule breaking one where the Congressman Dean Phillips, who's running for president, some of his supporters put together a custom GPT that's supposed to essentially be a virtual version of him to interact with. And OpenAI's rules say you can't uh, make a custom GPT that imitates a person without like their direct involvement. And because of election rules about different committees and super PACs or whoever, technically it wasn't like his campaign made it; it was his supporters. So they were told to take it down, and OpenAI took it down and banned the company, the actual developer company behind it, from the GPT store for a little while.
Yeah. Okay. Good stuff. Let's do some quick hitters. And Jurgen says he expects that OpenAI will get outcompeted by Google and Microsoft in the enterprise. I almost certainly, but they still could have a really big business. Okay, quick hitters here. Amazon Pharmacy embeds generative AI models to enhance medication distribution and stocking.
Yeah, short version is Amazon has a lot of LLMs that can help with the logistics side and the business side of the Amazon Pharmacy, as well as helping read prescriptions, fill out prescriptions, and do customer service. And while also using generative AI to try to predict and stock medicine and send medicine where they think there'll be a demand for it. So it's going to be a logistics and customer facing tool for them.
All right, SoundHound.
Yeah, SoundHound. They're using their generative AI models for Jersey Mike subs. They're starting out in 50 of them, but they're going to expand pretty quickly. And yeah, SoundHound. They were going through a lot of craziness a year ago, and now they're really they have a lot more irons in the fire even than back then, and that includes a lot of restaurants. And you're gonna hear their technology in a lot of phones and drive-throughs.
Excellent. And you have a story in here about Rabbit. They chose Perplexity, which is really kind of interesting. I mean, they're an action model, so it wasn't like they were going to be a knowledge model, but now they're partnering with Perplexity. Good win for Perplexity, although I don't think it's going to drive much use for them initially.
Yeah, it's I mean, it says what it says is that Rabbit is going to not rely on the big name of OpenAI or Google or whoever for what was the hottest product at CES. And it says that Perplexity is continuing to forge their own sort of generative AI path and not necessarily imitate what some of the big companies are doing. And I think the whole thing is they describe themselves as a conversational answer engine all about real time answers and up to date answers, and that's also sort of what Rabbit's pitching their device as. So it makes sense.
Absolutely. All right. So we're going to do winners and losers of the week in a couple minutes. But so if you have winners and losers of the week in generative AI, feel free to put those in the comments. But the one story that I want to talk about, and I want to go like double click on Google for a moment, because there was a really interesting study that came out that shows a decline in Google search quality. And there's some implications here for the company. And then there's also this other commentary that I want from Michael Spencer about their AGI play. But essentially, there's this paper that came out and said that they investigated for the first time to what degree Google is getting worse, because they acknowledged that on social media and other places, people are saying, geez, Google doesn't seem to be as good anymore. And I've talked about that a lot on this show in particular over the last year. But is it true? Do we have broad base? This is like we have anecdotes, and so they actually did. They took it's over 7,000 queries for specific different types of products, and every 2 weeks they ran those, and so and they got 20 search results for each, so 2 pages essentially of Google, Bing, and DuckDuckGo, and then they had a control set from Chat Noir and Clue. I can't remember the name. Clue Web 22, this was product reviews, right? So it was something that like showed from some scale, and basically they found yes, the pages that are optimized for SEO dominated the top 20. In fact, they were like over half of the top 20 search results. But overall, what they found was they represent of that product category probably something like 2% of all the pages that do product reviews. And so, I looked at it. There's a lot of charts. It's very, it's a little hard to get through sort of the data that they present, and they don't present that much of it, but it does show a clear correlation. And there's a correlation. The more affiliate links on a page, or I should say the highest results had higher number of affiliate links on a page. So it's like, and they did an analysis of sort of lower quality. And so the question is, can we generalize the findings from this? And I think probably yes, because if you're just talking about, let's say, the first 2 pages of Google, if you focus on an SEO primary strategy to get on the first 2 pages, and often at the expense of quality, you don't need that many people in any niche domain to do it. Right? Even if it's like 0.5% of the people that do it or something like that. And I think this is really the idea that I think is really important. And this coincides with information that was released in the fall. And I don't think we've talked about this on the show before, but Ben Gomez from Google Search had complained essentially about undue influence of the search team on the function of the search engine. And if you think about it, for a user, the number of clicks they have till they fulfill their intent, till they get their answer, the lower the number, the better. The faster it happens, the better. And there's like this push potentially to have more clicks, to have more things. And if you think about it, like you click on a link, let's say it's the first one or the second one in your Google search engine results page, and it's not what you want. You go back, the page reloads, ads are served again, and you click the second one, the third one. I find myself having to find things on page 3, 4, and 5, places I never wanted to go, and almost nobody in the population ever goes. And so there's this issue that they have, and I think that, and I'll get into some of the other points here, is that at the same time that we have these new tools coming out, which are better search experiences, they're answer engines, we have Google taking its core product, trying to maintain it, really putting Google SGE sort of in the background, not telling anybody it exists, except for the people who say, why don't you have something? They're not really promoting it. And we're also seeing potentially an across-the-board decline in the quality of their traditional search engine that they're trying to maintain because it drives such a profitable economic model.
Yep, it's honestly fascinating, and definitely makes me think of these stories about how Yahoo didn't want to buy Google because Google was too good at as a search engine, and would cut into their Yahoo's model of ads and continued use. Yeah.
All right. So we'll put this in. Let's see. Google search gets worse. We'll just put this in the chat. I think you should look at this. Is a long piece, so like it's a long report and it's a long analysis. So but I think a lot of people will like it. Now, there's another point that I wanted to talk about here. It's not just their incentives are screwed up. They also have, and Michael Spencer pointed this out, there's like this new memo out, and a lot of people, maybe some people saw it in The Verge, around this idea that they made some cuts in order to conserve money so they can invest in their pursuit of AGI. Right. And so it's like all in. He says their last moonshot. But the problem is they have a leadership problem. They have a technology problem. They have a talent problem. And in fact, I can't remember how many people are on attention that all it needs. This is the research, seminal research paper came out of Google Research, which kicked off the GenAI revolution, led to BERT, the first really generative AI large language model, and sort of like moved on to all these others. 8 of those people have founded other companies, right? They've left, and they're just a small percentage. If you just go to like all of the big LLMs, they've got people from Google, formerly from Google. And so he's saying it's a big talent chain. And ultimately, I think he and I both agree too, that it's probably a cultural issue. And it's like a real-time example of the innovator's dilemma, that they're not approaching this in the way that they should.
Yeah, you don't hear as much about the Google culture where they encourage you to allow and encourage you to spend some of your work time working on an independent project that could then be part of the Google product. That doesn't seem to come up anymore.
Exactly. Well, I don't think they're going to be the first to get to AGI. I think Michael Spencer says he's not even sure they will get to AGI. And I don't think anybody's going to get to the AGI, but even like whatever facsimile is that we think about it. And if they think that this is the way that they're going to save their business, I'd say, hey, just fix your traditional search first and then roll that into the generative search. And like, that would be a good start.
Yeah, well, it's because you see headlines like, oh, here's how voice assistants will be crucial for the future of generative AI. And then the next headline is Google lets go of 1,700 people from Google Assistant.
Got it. All right, let's do winners and losers of the week in generative AI. The first one's from Jürgen Gravestein. We'll let him have it. He thanks Rabbit R1. They sold 50,000 devices based on a demo. The loser will be Rabbit R1 as well. In the near future is they will ship to real customers and the end user experience will be totally underwhelming. That's my prediction. Yeah, I wouldn't even put him in the winner category because I think it's a push. But yes, I fully agree that that's a device that no one asked for and probably will not want. But I do think that they have a chance that if the large action model actually does serve a purpose, they could actually be an API that a lot of people plug into because it's just a bunch of services to navigate apps on the web or in mobile. And I think that can be useful. Who's your winner for the week, Eric?
I'm going to do a combo. I'm going to say ElevenLabs is my winner and my loser because on the winner side, obviously, they raised a ton of money. They're being used by almost half of the Fortune 500 now. They've got a lot of institutional, not just investors, but organizations eager to use their technology and employ them for everything from mainstream movies to every training video that a company offers. But on the other hand, there's more and more evidence that one of the first prominent deepfake voice calls of the 2024 election was built with their technology. So when this continues to happen, as it inevitably will, they're going to be one of the first places people look, and they're going to have to become very good at crisis response to bad or negative stories about their technology.
Yeah, I would say that I have a different winner, but I would say that ElevenLabs I think is a winner for sure in that they are now the primary alternative to getting things from the cloud providers like Amazon and Google. Yeah. So we've seen this over the years, like synthetic voices. People are like, yeah, I could test out all these independent things, or I could just plug into the cloud provider I already have because they've got these services. But I think that they are starting to get the scale and momentum around them that they will be on everybody's short list. And I think that that's going to be good for them. But I would say the real winners this week are all those companies that built software that uses OpenAI, and now they're paying less for tokens in and tokens out. So it's going to be a nice margin hit. They'll be able to lower prices or just get more margin. So I think that's super good, and that'll be good for everybody, I think, in the industry. My loser of the week is this is kind of bad news for Google. Google's had a lot of bad news, and I think there's a lot of people are really questioning if Gemini is all that. and it's certainly better than Palm, and like it's certainly a competitive model, but it's almost like they always want to oversell things, and we haven't seen Ultra yet. So when's that coming? So I think there's a lot of things along these lines that are going to be difficult for them, but geez, just fix search. And now now that this study's out that, hey, Google search is getting worse, there's going to be 7 or 8 others very soon. And that's going to be hard for them to deal with. And that's all I've got for everybody. Hey, give us a like before you leave on YouTube and LinkedIn. And I hope to have everyone back next week. We'll be here, I think, Friday at 11 next week.
That's the plan.
All right, everyone. Bye-bye.